the official story, it's not true. It's not true that the president's motorcade came around a corner and a man unknown to the U.S. government fired 3 shots, one of which missed, one of which wounded Connolly and Kennedy, and one of which killed Kennedy. That's not what happened. That's not what happened according to people in the car. That's not what happened according to the bystanders. It's just not what happened. So something else happened.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. Hey, it's Jordan. Happy to be joined by Jefferson Morley, investigative journalist. He is the founder of JFK Facts, and I would dare to say one of the preeminent experts and scholars that has been investigating, studying the assassination of President Kennedy for decades.
Yes.
It's kind of your beat.
Yeah.
So much admiration to you. Obviously, kind of a lot of news on this, particularly with President Trump, executive order to release remaining documents. We'll get to that. But the immediate news, the FBI suddenly found 2,400 documents pertaining to JFK. Can you fill us in on that?
So in response to the president's order, the FBI went back and checked some of its storage facilities and its record-keeping systems, which it had updated and enabled it to search and sort material much better. And they came back from that search and said that they had found 2,400 documents that were assassination related. They didn't say anything about what they concerned. We can speculate. One possibility is organized crime files. Although all of this material should have been turned over to the Assassination Records Review Board in the 1990s. And the fact that it wasn't is a gross violation of the JFK Records Act, which says federal agencies have to release all of their JFK documents immediately. So why these documents are surfacing now is something that needs to be explained. But I also think that we can say a little bit more about what's in them and not just guess, because we know what's assassination related. The JFK Review Board in the 1990s worked out a criteria. So documents that might be assassination related in this collection might include the field offices of the FBI in New Orleans and Miami. The JFK Records collection includes the office files for the Dallas field office, but not for those other 2 cities, which also figure prominently in the assassination story. The CIA need to do the same. They need to go back to their records, check them, and make sure that all assassination-related material has been given to the National Archives. And I know for a fact that they have not done that they have JFK-related material. So now the question is the CIA going to do what the FBI did and comply with the president's order, comply with the JFK Records Act, and make its JFK records available for public inspection soon? And that's still an open question. And
you, a couple months ago, had a major scoop that, unfortunately, you're familiar with the mainstream media not picking up these stories, but you had a source a couple months ago that revealed potentially file rooms that were unknown with documents, as well as possible deception.
This whistleblower described to me a secured, library within the CIA. Where, you had to have a high clearance to get into it. Had a guard who you had to show, and this person saw this sort of JFK room, and he also saw a JFK-related record that is not in the JFK collection. So. Congresswoman Luna, who's going to chair this House committee investigating the JFK files, referenced this, said that committee members would go and seek to visit this facility. So that's a good sign. And if the conditions were right, I think that I would ask the whistleblower if he would go public and tell his story publicly, the story that he told to me confidentially, and which I told in JFK Facts on Substack last year. And it's one of the most important stories I've run on on the Substack, because it shows you the reality of this is, the CIA does keep records on this. This isn't some spooky woo thing. This is something that can be understood. It's a very complex and important event. And, we're making some progress in getting to these records that the government truly doesn't want to share, but it takes a long time.
And just for reference, for people that don't know your work, and I would suggest people sign up, because I signed up for your Substack, JFK Facts. It's pretty great, consistent news, new information. But you typically don't use anonymous sources. This was an anonymous sourse, obviously, to protect the source. You obviously trust and vetted this source very well.
Yes. Yeah. No question. No question it's qualified. No question that he had the access he had. No question that he's, a trustworthy person who is describing, real facts and things that really happen. No doubt in my mind. And after 40 years of reporting, I know when a source is good. This is a good source.
I want to play a clip from Congresswoman Paulina's press conference yesterday. Like you said, she will be chairing this. She's from Florida, and she was pretty transparent that her initial inquiry, she does not buy the single bullet theory.
Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public. Yeah, I was going to say, based on what we're actually looking to do with the JFK investigation, I'm looking to actually bring in some of the attending physicians at the initial assassination, and then also people that had been on the various commissions looking into, like the Warren Commission, looking into the initial assassinations. There's been conflicting evidence, and I think that even the FBI at the time reported some anomalies in the initial autopsy at Bethesda, Maryland. All of those, though, seem to have been rinsed and repeated in the media to push a certain narrative that we don't agree with. And so I think that in order to put to bed some of the theories that have been out there on John F.
So putting aside, she got some blowback for saying she's going to bring back Warren Commission members who are mostly dead. But I do think it's interesting, because I think, based on following your reporting as well as Oliver Stone's work, there were a lot of witnesses that were talked to that were ignored or removed from the Warren Commission. So isn't it a challenge? A lot of these witnesses that provided information that could have exposed, potentially the CIA's role are no longer alive.
No, there's a wealth of information out there to show. First of all, the official story, it's not true. It's not true that the president's motorcade came around a corner and a man unknown to the U.S. government fired 3 shots, one of which missed, one of which wounded Connally and Kennedy, and one of which killed Kennedy. That's not what happened. That's not what happened according to people in the car. That's not what happened according to the bystanders. That's not what happened to the doctors who tried to save Kennedy's life. That's not what happened according to the people who saw the autopsy. It's just not what happened. So something else happened. And, the congressman is refreshing, saying 2 shooters. The Dallas doctors agreed that Kennedy had been hit by gunfire from the front. They were unanimous about that. Dr. Robert McClellan stated it clearly, certain as I can be, sure as I can be, he said, that Kennedy had a blowout wound in the back of his head from a shot fired from the front. So we have a lot of evidence that the official story is not true. What we have the opportunity now is to go in and find these records that were identified in the 1990s, and where they're hiding something. The last thing that they're going to release is going to be the most damaging thing, because they're going to hide the most damaging thing for the longest time, but naturally, right? So when we peel back the onion of classification that is around CIA operations around Lee Harvey Oswald, that's what we've learned in the last 10 years, and that's what we're going to learn more about, right? Which is, this guy didn't come out of nowhere, okay? He was tracked, he was monitored, he was manipulated. He was in constant touch with CIA intelligence collection operations and CIA connected people, especially as he makes his way towards Dallas. What's his role in the ambush? He seems to know something about what happened. He said he's a patsy, which implies other people are involved. and he's killed. So we don't have his testimony, but we do know the reason he was killed. We do know the reason he was killed. And I was on Piers Morgan last week, and there was another guest on there, Michael Franzine, who was a former mafia guy. He was a made man, and now he's kind of like a media commentator on what the mafia is really like. And he said, and this is a guy who's in the upper ranks of the organized crime for the past 30 years. He said the common knowledge among all of these bosses was that organized crime was asked to get rid of Oswald. And he said that was the organized crime role in the Kennedy assassination. And that's absolutely right. So we are learning more about how this incredible series of events happened, and why no one was ever brought to justice, and why we got this crappy story that just doesn't hang together and now has totally fallen apart.
Can I also
Sure.
ask you, because you said it was refreshing that the Congresswoman said 2 shooters, which the media has routinely went with the CIA version of a lone gunman, but wasn't it even dating back to the original House Select Committee investigation? Didn't they find that there was a second gunman, but they said his shot or whomever it was missed, and Oswald supposedly? So it was found even dating back to the initial investigation. Didn't they acknowledge there was 2 shooters?
The House Select Committee, yes, said that there were 2 shooters. That was the official conclusion of the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1979, which reopened the JFK case because of lots of new information that emerged in the mid-1970s that called into question the official story. And we're kind of like that in the same period now, where there's a political change, cultural change, demand for revelation, for transparency in the Congress, and leads to the Church Committee and the reopening of the JFK assassination. And it remains to be seen about this latest investigation, but people want to take a second look because the official story is not true, and there has to be a better explanation. And if you look at what they're hiding the most, it's about CIA operations around Oswald. That's what we're going to learn more about.
And do you believe that, obviously it's called JFK Facts. You don't take a position. You just want the transparency and the release. Do you believe it's possible one of the most closely safeguarded secrets has to do with Oswald's supposed defection to the Soviet Union? Because he was in the Soviet Union for several years before he came back, supposedly as a, American defector?
It's possible. It's possible that that they'll do that. We know a lot about the records that are still withheld. There's also one place that might be relevant to the story of Oswald the defector is Oswald's tax returns are still classified and were exempted from the JFK Records Act. It remains to be seen if Trump's going to unveil those, but those might reflect on the fact that he was a defector. I mean, the point is the CIA's understanding of Oswald before the assassination, that's the big story that we've learned, and we're going to learn more about it. And so the idea that, there were people high in the CIA who were very familiar with the movements of Lee Harvey Oswald throughout 1963. Right? That fact alone needs explanation, and the documents we're going to see, I think, are going to illuminate who was doing that and how did they keep it out of the public record for so long.
Right.
And because they had powers of secrecy is the short answer, and also because they had impunity. Nobody was going to challenge them on it. So
right.
So it's a hopeful moment. I thought the Congresswoman, she knows the case. She seems informed, and it sounds like she's interested in all aspects of the story. So let's see what she does in a month.
I'm sure throughout your decades of reporting on this, one of the frustrations has been dealing with the mainstream media. You've criticized Oliver Stone is criticized, particularly when it happened. that the New York Times, Washington Post, all the broadcast networks pretty much regurgitated the CIA and government line. I watched the CNN segment on this yesterday, which I was just astounded because it was kind of poo-pooing all of this as conspiracy. I'd love your thoughts. I'll play one or two clips.
Yeah.
1 second.
I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were 2 shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
I mean, look, so to be clear, we've seen no evidence to indicate that there's anything to this, right? But, you know, to Jamie's point, you know, we've got these boxes that have been found. It appears that what happened with the FBI is that, you know, you had old records that were not filed correctly or categorized correctly, so they didn't know they existed until an order from President Biden to digitize these documents, and so that's how they found these additional documents. Whether they will answer that persistent question that is still out there, and I think, you know, obviously we should keep a mind open, we'll see.
For clarity, there are documents that we understand the CIA has, and for national security.
So it just seems to me they take everything on faith, that this was just an honest, like, bureaucratic accident, that these documents weren't found.
I mean, you know, that's fine. I don't worry too much about the mainstream media because people come to me because I have credible reporting, and mainstream media reporters flock to me now because I know more about these records than anybody else. So I don't get caught up in feeling like I'm a victim of a media game. No, the media comes to me because I know what I'm talking about, and everybody comes to me because I know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So Rex Bradford and I started the JFK Facts blog in 2012 because we were looking ahead to 2013, 50th anniversary. And we said, there is so much bad journalism. We just got to get out there and just start laying out the facts. And so that was the birth of JFK Facts. So that was, you know, 3 million page views ago. And people now know, if you want to know what's happening in JFK's story, there's one place to go and only one place to go. You know, this reporter doesn't know anything about those files, doesn't know anything about what happened in 1963, and, you know, and doesn't care. You know, the Congress cares, the people care. So, you know, see you later. I mean, you just missed the bus. You know, that's my feeling about those people.
Gotcha. Allow me one more clip because I think it's pertinent to what I'm trying to talk about.
What will be interesting with these FBI documents, did they get lost somewhere in the system? And that's what happened? Or was there a conscious decision made not to hand them over? I think we will know shortly.
It leads to another layer of intrigue. I highly doubt, though, Jamie, that if one of these conspiracy theories were true, that the CIA somehow had an involvement in Kennedy's assassination, that somebody would sit there and type out, yeah, it was the CIA, and that this would have been filed away. Do we think in any way these documents are going to settle this debate?
Are you starting a new conspiracy theory?
So I agree with you that the mainstream media is, you know, has shrinking relevance in a lot of things, but particularly this. But I did want to ask you about that because it seems to me, I mean, that obviously they didn't write, it was us on the documents, but this campaign not to release the documents, to me, would be evidence in itself they're hiding something.
Yeah, you know, I mean, to me, that's self-evident. I'll ask them, you know, to come on there. I mean, the problem with those people is that, you know, they literally don't know what they're talking about. So when you say Oswald was under surveillance, they say conspiracy theory. And I say, no, you know, how do you explain this? When the doctors said this, how do you explain it? They say, you know, Gerald Posner wrote a book 30 years ago. So what? You know, so what? Posner wrote a book 30 years ago. Look at the evidence. So, you know, this is a long, hard slog, but, you know, look, you know, it's paid off. We're going to get Rex Bradford and I, we 12 years ago, 13 years ago, we were talking about, we need a media outlet so that we can get all the JFK, RFK, and MLK records in the public view and online. And we've made great strides towards that end. So I don't worry about the mainstream media.
And my last question, this is not, I don't care your politics, but there's been several presidents, including Trump the first time, that said we're going to release the documents. Then there was somehow a hiccup and needed more delays. Obviously, it optically seems like he is actually going to come through. But does this feel different to you? Why should we trust Donald Trump?
No, it does feel different. I mean, Trump will trade away these files for something else that he considers in his interest, right? His interest is purely transactional. But with RFK and Tulsi Gabbard looking like they're going to be in his administration, these people have a more personal commitment to the issue, and they will lose face. Trump doesn't care about losing face, but they will lose face, and Trump will lose face too. And I think the whole reason Trump shifted on this was because trusted allies like Andrew Napolitano and Tucker Carlson, this was one area where they give him a really hard time, and he was embarrassed, and he regretted that he took Pompeo's advice. So now he feels like this is the thing to do. But we shall see, because they're creating a task force. There still is no plan, right? There was supposed to be a plan for JFK records. ODNI says they've given a plan, but that was the acting ODNI director. It wasn't a Trump appointee, so why is Trump going to care about that plan? So, and this is what they're good at: kicking the can down the road, changing the subject. We will probably get a lot more of that. Those conspiracy theorists. Although, I know mainstream media reporters, they're backpedaling now, right? They realize they're out on a limb, and there's a more secure place to view the story from than, they're all crazy, Right. So, so I think, I think we're going to see a change in media attitude, especially, 14,000 pages from the FBI, very secretive organization around the assassination. I think we're going to learn. I'm pretty sure we're going to learn very significant things.
Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for staying on this for decades.
You're welcome.
Jefferson Morley, everyone check out JFK Facts to find out the history and the present. Take care.